welcome to Brain Chat. I'm Dr. Mitzi Joy Williams, your board-certified neurologist and MS specialist, and my mission is to engage, educate, and empower those affected by MS to become an active part of their healthcare team. Here on Brain Chat, we'll be discussing all things MS, health and wellness, advocacy, and we'll even throw a little bit of music and music therapy in there as well. Thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned for the next episode. Happy Monday, my friends. Welcome to Brain Chat. I'm Dr. Mitzi, the nerdy neurologist, and I'm so excited to be here with you all on another Monday night, talking about topics that, really are directed toward helping people living with MS as well as their care partners and those in the MS community. And listen, y'all, this show is going to be so amazing. I know I say that every time, but I'm serious this time. All right, so I'm so excited to have my amazing super friends with me here tonight, Dr. Heidi Creighton and Victoria Reese. We are going to have an amazing discussion about self-advocacy as well as shared decision-making, which is a new term that we use in the medical community to, describe how we try to collaborate to make decisions versus the traditional model of, the doctor tells you what to do and you go home and you're supposed to do it. So you guys know how we do on Brain Chat. Type into the chat where you are logging in from. I bid you greetings from Atlanta, Georgia, where it is still hot, but, kind of rainy and dreary here. But we're excited about this action-packed discussion that we're going to have tonight. All right, so type in the chat where you're logging in from. And then also, please, if you guys have questions throughout the show, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll do a Q&A toward the end of the program. And I see somebody's in California. All right, welcome to Brain Chat. And I am going to bring up our amazing guest. So we have Victoria Reese, who is an amazing mom, partner, entrepreneur, businesswoman, patient advocate, and she is one of the co-founders of We Are Ill, which is an amazing online community of Black women living with multiple sclerosis. I've had the opportunity to work with her in many different venues and so excited to have her on tonight to share some of her wisdom. And then we also have Dr. Heidi Creighton, who is one of my amazing colleagues. She is the founder and medical director of the Greater Washington, of the Multiple Sclerosis Center of Greater Washington. She is an MS neurologist, a researcher, a speaker, author, all of the things above. And I'm so excited to have these two dynamic women with me tonight. And I am going to bring them up to the stage. Welcome to Brain Chat, ladies.
Hi there.
All right. So this is really exciting. And I really like covering this topic of advocacy, because even though it's something that we should know, it's a fairly new concept that we've been talking about, really front and center, is particularly in the MS community. So I'm really excited that we get to talk about this tonight with you guys. We're going to have some fun. I see we've got some people logging in from Durham, North Carolina, Nebraska. Oh, you might be the first person I've had from Nebraska, Baltimore, and Albany, Georgia. Not New York, but we have Albany too down here. All right, so you guys keep typing in the chat and we're just going to go ahead and get the party started. So why don't we start out, because I love for all of my guests to just kind of tell us about how you got involved in the MS community, what your connection is to MS, just to kind of level set so everybody knows who you are. So why don't we start with Victoria?
Okay. Well, again, I'm Victoria Reese, and my connection to MS is that I was actually diagnosed with MS in September of 2012. So going on about 10 years of being a person living with it. But my additional connection is that I went ahead and started a patient advocacy organization called We Are Ill, as Mitzi mentioned. So super into it outside of my own personal connection. But now I am just an advocate and have dedicated my work to spreading awareness that Black people and Black women get MS too.
Awesome. And we're going to circle back to that. All right. Heidi, Dr. Creighton, tell us about how you got involved with MS.
I had a really great mentor who knew that I would really fall in love with MS and kind of steered me in the right way and away from what I wanted to do, which was stroke.
We're so glad they steered you away.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And, I always say to people who are going into medicine, you kind of have to decide whether you want to, kind of be with people for the long haul and get to know them, or whether you just kind of want to just touch them briefly and move on. And I knew that I wanted to be in that kind of long, chronic relationship. And, it's changed so much since you and I started off in MS. It's become so much more exciting.
Absolutely.
And so this is all I've done is MS for the past 24 years now. I can't believe it. And I can't imagine not being involved with MS. I love it.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Okay. So, everybody hopefully knows my connection to MS. I'm an MS neurologist here in Atlanta, and just have really a passion for educating people, which is kind of where this, idea originated, to just talk about different topics. So, what I really wanted us to kind of delve into from the beginning is talking about this thing called shared decision making. So it's something that we talk about at a lot of the medical conferences, but let's break that down. What does that really mean? Traditionally when we think of the doctor, we think of the doctor as, an older guy with some glasses and a bow tie that says, this is what you're going to do. And then you're supposed to go home and do it. But, I think that as people who are in the medical field, we realize that, even though we are the experts about a disease process, each patient or person living with a condition is the expert on their own body. And so we have to figure out how we can work together, and use both of our levels of expertise to come up with the best plan that works for that person. So what is shared decision making, Dr. Creighton?
You're right. It is kind of the new buzzword. There's something that I think it's actually meant and something that I think is used inappropriately. Shared decision making really should be having a discussion, an educational discussion about options, about treatment options, education about the condition, and then to be able to kind of empower the patient to be able to make decisions regarding their care. Nobody knows you are correct. Nobody knows what MS is like for somebody better than the person who's living it. There's no doctor that can possibly even come close to knowing that. But sometimes I see that there are some colleagues that we kind of see over time that use that as, I think, kind of, it kind of allows them to not do that educating. They think the shared decision-making means a patient goes out of their office with no information and is to do all of that booklets. Educating on their own, or with 10 booklets.
That they read on their own.
I wish those things were passe, but they're not.
Right.
And so that is not shared. That's called a cop-out because the doc isn't really doing their job. So shared means coming together and sharing. It means a back and forth.
Absolutely. So what does that mean to you, Victoria?
I think one of the words she said, it was really stuck with me, was just empowered. I don't know. I talk about this professional patient. I call it a professional patient. I think when you live with a chronic illness, you become one at some point. Obviously, if you choose to, the more informed and knowledgeable you are. But I think like there's this shift. So there's a person who goes to the doctor every year or every 6 months or something for like an annual checkup and then maybe a common cold. But then there's a person that lives with something like a chronic illness and they go to the doctor more often and multiple doctors and then for multiple reasons. And I think that once you cross that bridge, while all of us should be informed patients and have shared decision making, I think when there's so much going on and so much that you're not knowledgeable of, it becomes not your life anymore. It's like someone or all of these people start to tell you about your life, tell you what you're diagnosed with, tell you what you should do, tell you this. And it's like you don't have control over your life anymore. And with something like MS, you already feel like you don't have control anymore. So then when you have to make these decisions and you have a doctor and this relationship with doctor, you want to feel empowered. You want to get some power back. And I think that word empowerment is so crucial when it comes to shared decision making because of all of the things outside of actually being a part of the decision that's being made, what that does to you as a person, what that does to you as a person living with MS. It's like, I can't control all this, but I do have a say in the direction I'm going and the things that my doctor is telling me to do. I have a decision in this. I have a say in this. So you get a little bit of power back. That's what I think of, and that's what it means to me.
Yeah, so I love that word empowerment. And I think that it's so key because, as you said, people often do feel helpless when they get diagnosed, and many times the first thing they ask is, what can I do to help myself, And so, we go through this process. And I think the other piece that we've realized over time is that, our conversations about what people can do about their MS have gotten longer and longer, which is a good thing because it means we have more options, So my conversation used to be very short. I could tell people about all the drugs on the market for MS in about, 10, 15 minutes, and we could just make a decision, bada bing, bada bang. Now we have to talk about, we have to narrow it down. Then I send you home, make you do some homework. Then you come back and we talk about it again, So it's a good thing that that these conversations have gotten more complex. But I think this is also important, that we give people time to absorb, because sometimes in that visit where people are being diagnosed, it can be a lot to take in. And if we're trying to, say, now we got to make a decision right now about what we want to do, then it can actually take some of that power away or not allow people time to digest and really make, what they feel like is the best decision. What are some thoughts about that?
I think you're totally right. I have never diagnosed somebody or confirmed a diagnosis and then kind of jumped right into talking about medicines. I do agree with you that people kind of need a little chance to digest. Their whole life has changed in 2 seconds with 2 letters. And I think that we have to acknowledge grief. We have to really kind of treat people and acknowledge that there's a grief. There's grief for the loss of the pictures that we all have about what our adulthood is going to be like. Mm-hmm. All that changes. We change that in a snap of a finger, and then we do nothing about it. We just kind of drop people. If somebody's diagnosed with cancer, there's a nurse who's waiting outside the door, who kind of is there for them and shuttles them to support systems. And we just, we shake people's life up like a snow globe, and then nothing.
Right.
And I think that there's grief that needs to be acknowledged.
Absolutely. And then I think another key piece when we talk about shared decision making is kind of priority setting. So Victoria and I were involved in this really interesting study with a CME company where we polled, doctors, and we polled people living with MS in certain clinics, some in MS centers, some outside of MS centers. The questionnaire was also given to some members of, We Are Ill, a broader patient community, just to see if our priorities are the same. And interestingly enough, there were some areas where things kind of lined up, and there were other areas where, the doctors thought this was this important, and the patients were like, nah, not really, or the patients were like, this is really important, and the doctors were like, I don't think so. So I think another piece is having a conversation about what our goals are. So what does that look like, Victoria, ideally, or what types of things have you heard that, from your community that where there may be a disconnect between what people living with MS feel like is a priority versus what their healthcare team feels like are priorities?
Yeah, I can imagine that a healthcare team would immediately prioritize the medication, the therapy that they need to start, like figuring out what that looks like. And I think any knowledgeable person of anything, they may come to or feel like coming to that decision is an easier thing than it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like as mentioned, it's just this life-altering moment, and because of how MS is depicted, it's super scary, and everything about your future is rushing to you in this decision. So I don't want to say that your therapy as a patient, your therapy is not your first priority, but I want to say it's like 1.5. And I want to say that because, as we mentioned, grief, that just comes flooding through you. And I don't think that as a person, I guess from speaking from experience, you don't immediately realize that you're grieving, and you don't also immediately realize the priority of grief. I got to figure out how I'm grieving, because the decisions I make after this moment could change the trajectory of my illness. So I got to check myself too, as best as I can in this grieving state, and also allow the grief. So I want to say that obviously therapy is super a priority, but I want to say that most of the community is thinking either what's going on in my life, like what does this truly look like in a practical state, like my everyday, my day to day. And I want to say that our community mostly feels like, what does this look like financially? What does it look like for my
Mm,
job? And I'm saying financially in an umbrella statement because your employment, if you can work, affects your, financial status. All of the doctor's appointments or insurance or copays, that affects your job. If you miss work, that affects your finances. All of the things, I think our community, specifically Black women, are thinking about their role in their family and how this condition, you don't even have time to think about how it affects you. You're thinking about how it affects everyone else.
mm, yeah. Taking care of everybody else, that superwoman syndrome, but often necessity, right? I think that that is extremely important, and what you said about the grieving process and also what Heidi said about the grieving process is really important, because again, people have to kind of process what's going on. And then we also have to be able to provide resources for people who need help kind of dealing with just a diagnosis, on top of, things like thinking about medications. So, what does that conversation look like, Heidi, when we're talking about goal setting, or what a person's priorities are? What does that look like in the real world, or how do you try to, connect or bridge that gap that may exist in some other spaces?
I think first it's really important to kind of establish trust, and it's important to
Hmm.
establish that as a healthcare provider, you are invested and you care.
Right.
Because if those things don't connect early on, there's no way I think any patient is going to really embrace that relationship.
Hmm.
So I think it's important to educate, and I spend a lot of time on the front end just educating about what MS is and what it's not,
Right.
and that people need to really take control to be a partner with us. This is not just the healthcare team and the patient. It's important to understand how MS affects you and whether those ways that you're affected bother you or not, to know you want help in this area, not this area. So it's really first talking a lot about what MS is and what it's not, and then talk about symptoms, and that having symptoms is a byproduct of kind of what's already done. And even if you're on the best medicine and your MS is stable, you still might have symptoms that need to be
Hmm.
managed forever and ever. And I think that symptom management is so incredibly important and not really addressed enough. I don't, I believe that patients don't really focus so much on whether or not there's a new spot on an MRI. They want to know that their bladder is going to be controlled through a meeting or through, a back to school night. They want to know that after they get themselves ready in the morning to go to work, they're not going to be so incredibly fatigued that they feel like they're walking through peanut butter. That if their legs are jumpy and kicky, that's taken care of. It's really how to live on a day-to-day basis
Hmm.
successfully with MS.
Yeah.
That's empowering.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what you said is so key, that we do have to, focus on improving a person's daily function. One of the things that's very difficult, but true, is that when we talk about the medicines that we use for MS, we know that they don't fix the things that are already there. So as we're spending all this time educating about what are the options, what do they do, what are the side effects, etc., we also need to focus on how people feel on a day-to-day basis, because it does matter if we prevent worsening, but we also want people to be able to function to the best of their ability now. And I think it's so important that you said we absolutely have to address that. So one of the things that I usually ask people is, I ask people to prepare when they come to see me. So I like when people bring notebooks. I like notepads. I'm like, your smartphones are smart. Make yourself a voice memo. Sometimes they bring a person, and the person is their extra brain to remember all the stuff that they can't remember. But I think that that's so important, because we want to make sure, there are things that I want to address during visits, like your MRI, like if you've gotten worse. But, we also want to make sure we're addressing the things that are important, to our patients. So how would you advise somebody, Victoria, to prepare, or to participate in that decision making process for a visit, for example?
Yeah, great question. I'm an advocate of the journal or the smartphone, putting notes in your phone, but I'm honestly becoming more of an advocate of bringing someone with you. I say this because even myself, I don't want to say I'm in denial, but I think it's so overwhelming sometimes of the laundry list of symptoms. I'm like, is this MS or is this because I'm 35? Like, I'm trying to figure out, or like, is this mom brain or like, and I think that sometimes I'm really trying to figure out what is it? And is this something I need to be blaming MS on? Or is this just regular adult woman things, And then also checking myself to make sure that I'm honestly um, operating with integrity to say, honestly, this has been bothering me. And I wanna talk about it, and I want to figure out if there's a solution to it, and things like that. I think it could be easy to push it to the side because it's not too bad. It's like I just want to keep functioning and I want to be normal. So notebook, notepad, and now I'm an advocate of like bringing someone with you so they can really say, no, she's saying fatigue doesn't bother her, but she's sometimes really fatigued and I'm worried, or something like that, as an example.
So I call the care partners the truth tellers, right? Because it is so often that I will have my patient sitting there. I'm like, "How you doing, Mr. Smith?" And he's like, "I'm fine." And his wife is like, "Mm-mm, no, he's not fine. Let me tell you what happened." Or even, I had an example of someone who I had been seeing for a long time, and every time they came to see me, um, she said she was fine. And then finally her husband came and was like, she's been in 5 car accidents. Like, and I'm like, oh my God. But again, it's about having someone with a different perspective. So certainly there are times when people, we all may brush off things that, we probably need to get paid attention to, but sometimes we honestly may not view it from the same lens. Like, I
Yeah.
may not recall that I asked you the same question 5 times, right? Obviously, I don't remember because I asked you 5 times, right? So it's having that other perspective, right? And somebody saying, okay, these are things that I'm seeing from the outside that they may not recognize as readily, or, that they may attribute to other things, but these things are concerning, especially compared to how they used to function, or, et cetera. What are your thoughts on that, Heidi?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I have to say, it's no disrespect. I'm not gender bashing, but we do see this a lot of times with guys
Oh
where
yeah,
they
they definitely
they
don't
come
tell the
in,
truth.
everything is fine, everything is great. I mean, practically, just perfect. Like, what MS? And it's when the girlfriend, the wife who comes in, and it's always just like you said, no. And they have a list. And, did you ever talk about this? Did you ever talk about this? I have some women who, when their man comes in, I have to conference them in on the phone because they couldn't make the appointment, and they have a list. We start off with the guy saying, I'm fine. And then we put her on.
And she's
I
like,
love
what about
those.
that? And he's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. And what about
Oh,
that?
yeah. Oh, that's nothing.
Exactly. Oh, it's nothing. So I think it's important. And again, we can be creative about the ways that people participate. So we know people are busy. So sometimes I have people call on the phone and they'll conference somebody in. Sometimes they'll FaceTime somebody when we're doing televisits. There are certain platforms where I can do almost like a 3-way call where, the other person logs in and you log in at the same time, and we can have that discussion. But it's important to have that in real time, because it's much more difficult after the visit is over to gotta go back and say, well, so and so said, So, if you can address it and kind of set it up so that that care partner is participating at some point during the visit, that makes a huge difference, not only for you to remember things, but also for us as healthcare providers to get a broader picture of what's going on. So, I want to talk a little bit about self advocacy. We're already kind of talking about it, but I think that this is extremely important, right? Because I always tell people you're your own best advocate. And in a perfect world, healthcare providers will give you all the resources you need so you don't have to go on the internet and look up anything, but it just doesn't happen that way in the real world. So, how do we begin And I know that Victoria is an amazing advocate, and you've got a group full of, amazing advocates. So how do we start to talk to people about self-advocacy and asking questions and being an active part, of their healthcare team? I'll let you start that conversation.
Yeah. So I'd love to, as a community, as an MS community, outside of maybe before there's this newly diagnosed phase. I think that's a phase, a section of your journey. Before we even introduce that, I would love to shine more light on that grieving process, even if it's a moment. I just would like to say that's the step first, because I think that when you skip that step, it really does change the trajectory of how you're navigating everything else. So I think and I can only speak for myself, but I also try to speak for our community of Black women that talk about it often. But I think that what I see a pattern of is not really grieving, not really like coping with what's going on, and getting centered with and figuring out how you're going to position yourself as a newly diagnosed person with MS. It changes how they navigate everything else. And I say that because that power word comes back. Owning your health and taking back that power that you feel like you lose when you get diagnosed with anything. And then, so once you get to that point where, okay, I'm newly diagnosed, I'm really trying to navigate this thing. I think self-advocacy starts there or it can start there rather. When you check self, you understand, okay, this is how I'm going. And even if you fluctuate with your feelings don't stay the same all the time, but this is how I'm going to own this situation. This diagnosis is unfortunate, not what I intended for myself. It may not be what I pictured, but this is a new picture, and everything that I can do in my power, I've got to participate in and be an active participant. So from that point on, to me, self-advocacy is, as much as you can, digesting what MS is, whether it's the definition, being able to define it and explain it to your family members, explain it to, I don't know, a coworker, anybody, explain it to your child, understanding what it is. And then that's when you step into that professional patient, what I call it, zone of like studying things before you go to the doctor. Thinking about your symptoms and like Googling it. And I hate to, every time I say, did you Google it? I feel like I'm sounding sarcastic, but I really mean it, because Google's our best friend. Googling MS and this symptom. I'm trying to understand what that means, understanding what your body is doing just in general, and then coming to the doctor with a little bit of information. Don't WebMD yourself to death, but because we know doctors don't like that. But at the end of the day, like if your doctor uses a term in one appointment and you don't know what that is, ask in real time, but write it down. You can go home and Google it so that you can now be a little bit more informed, instead of just showing up to the doctor, waiting on them to badger you about questions, how you're doing. Because when you say how you're doing, of course, we naturally say, I'm good. But I think sometimes doctors have to pull out information. And I think sometimes it's not just the discomfort, it's the literal lack of knowledge, not knowing the words and being able to describe things. I did a podcast recently. I'm like, you got to Google synonyms. Like Google, what word do I
use for this problem?
Right. So now I'm going to my doctor with some type of language to describe what this is. And I don't think us as patients, I'm speaking for myself too, it's a tool, it's a skill. And I want to partner with my doctor. I want to partner with my doctor so that it's not pulling teeth, so that they're not feeling like, Victoria's coming in here and I know she did not do this and that. And I know she's not listening. She didn't take any notes. Like, it's not easy to be a doctor either. And I challenge our group all the time. Owning your health means knowing your rights, knowing what you want, asking questions, coming prepared, and doing your part as a patient. It is not a one-sided situation. So self-advocacy is like owning that power.
Yeah. So that's like a whole sermon, right? That's a whole word. But let me just touch on two things that really stood out to me. Number one, I love how you talked about starting with self, right? Dealing with that process. And, I spend a lot of time educating people about, the fact that MS is unpredictable and that it's a big life stressor on top of regular life stressors, and so we have to address it, just like if we don't deal with it, it's going to deal with you. So either you can deal with it right now, or we can be 3-4 years from now and you like, I never accepted my diagnosis and we're doing a lot worse, and so I think that that is so important, to address it and kind of take it head on. And I absolutely recommend counseling for every one of my patients, especially when they're first diagnosed. So taking care of that mental health is extremely important because it does affect the rest of your health. And then the other thing that I really like that you talked about was prepping. So I encourage people to prep in terms of, kind of questions they have, but I like the idea of kind of prepping in terms of how to describe things, because sometimes we like to not think about things until we get to the doctor. So if you've not thought about it or thought about how to characterize it, it is difficult for me to understand it. So I'm like, is it squeezing? Is it like a rubber band? Is it like a tightness? Is it like a Charlie horse? And you're like, I hadn't really thought about it over the past 6 months until I got here today. So then it makes it a lot more difficult for us to figure out what's going on. And it's like with anything else, right? If I was going to buy a car, I don't show up on the lot, right? I'm going to look it up. I'm going to look at what colors they come in. I'm going to look at the specs, how many seats, if it's 4-wheel drive or 2-wheel, or all. I'm going to look at all of those things, right? And prepare myself. So if we do that in the natural sense, we do that when we buy anything. If I just got a Peloton and I looked at all of the specs and the other bikes and, which screen turns around and what are the advantages and the disadvantages, so how much more important is our health, to kind of try to prepare to the best of our abilities, right? Nobody's asking you to go to medical school, before every visit, or read every scientific article, but to the best of your ability, try to prepare and be ready, so that we can address the issues that you have efficiently. What are your thoughts about that, Heidi? Because
So,
Victoria preached a whole sermon, right? We could just pass the
I'm
offering
telling you,
basket
I'm
right now.
telling you, exactly. Just, amen. And you were saying all the things that I wish everybody could hear, because you have to make really, really good use of your time. And it is really hard as the HCP to be pulling stuff out. I want people, but that's part of that upfront education also, is tell people you need to be in touch with how MS affects you, so that you can communicate that to me. But sometimes I find myself saying to patients, if it takes more than like 3 or 4 adjectives, then it's MS. Because they'll come in saying, I don't know if it's MS or not. And I'm like, if you're having that hard of a time describing it, it's MS. And then sometimes I'll say, what would you do to me to make me experience that? And then sometimes people can say, you know what, if I had like an ice cube and I kind of, went down your arm with the edge of the ice cube and then the flat part of the ice cube. And I said, I got it. I get it. So what would you do to me? What could you do to me to make me feel the way that you're trying to describe? Because sometimes there aren't words. It's just not describable. So I think that that's really, really, really important. But people in this day and age, you do become a professional patient. But damn it, you better know the medicine you're on. If you come in saying you're on that red little round pill, that is not the way to roll as a professional patient. You better have the list. You better know how you take it, when you take it, what is it for?
Absolutely.
And I'm telling you, medical history, if you have a scar on your body, you better know damn straight what organ came out, what somebody was doing monkeying around with you. People say, oh, I had some kind of surgery. And I'm like, and you had to consent for that. What was done? Well, I had abdominal surgery. You want to talk about how much is going on in here? So yes, we all need to know about ourselves so that we can make it very, very easy to relay that.
Absolutely.
That's
and your other health conditions.
As a professional patient.
Absolutely. And your health conditions. Because commonly I say, do you have any medical problems? They're like, no. And I'm like, well, you got 10 medications here. So there's hypertension. Do you take that for high cholesterol? Yeah, I got that. Okay, this is for diabetes. Yeah, I got that. And so You know, knowing again, just like you would study up on whatever it is, you know, study up on yourself and what you
But
have going
don't
on.
waste that precious time that you have with that HCP. You have a finite amount of time.
Right.
And once it's ding, you're over, then you may not have even had your agenda managed. And if you don't, the doc's going to take over the agenda.
Yep.
So you better come in as a
'Cause that's what
wise
we do.
consumer and have your little agenda there. And then if there's any time over, then it's my agenda. But we start off with your agenda.
Exactly.
And I say to people, you spend more time finding somebody for shopping a car loan or a mortgage than you do an MS doc
or a
who
hairdresser.
you're going to have this long-term relationship. I'm telling you.
I love this
So-
Because the hair has got to be right. The hair has got to be right. So again, you know your choices, right? Know what your options are. You know,
Right.
I had Mary Hughes, who Heidi knows, on here. And that first episode, we talked about firing your doctor. You know, listen, if you're not getting what you need, know that you have options. And it's not always necessarily that is a bad doctor, but MS is
not a good fit for
lifelong
you.
journey. Right.
Yeah.
It's got to be a good fit for you. There are people that meet me and I'm just not their cup of tea. And that's okay. As long as you find somebody that you can engage with, that you feel like is giving you the information in a way that's acceptable to you, you know, that's the most important thing. And so just like you shop for those options, nobody's saying doctor shop, right? But it's okay to seek a second opinion, especially if you feel like your concerns are not being addressed, that you're not being heard. And sometimes people will come and see me for that second opinion and say, you know what, you said the same thing my other person said, I'm good. See you. And that's fine too, you know. But it's okay to know what their options are. And I think it's also important that everybody, at least at some point during the course of their journey, see a specialist, right? You know, so everybody doesn't have close access to a specialist, but I think at least once everybody should consider trying to get to a specialist to at least kind of go through their plan, you know, even if they don't have access to see somebody on a regular basis. Yeah.
This is so good because the role of the patient, I don't think people talk about it enough.
No.
And it's like, what is your role in this? You know, you have a role, right? And I feel like as a patient, but also as an advocate, I find myself doing it because it doesn't, I don't think it's always comfortable for doctors to do it because it's easy to be like, oh, that's so insensitive. You know, it's easy to go that route, but we have a lot to do with our own health and we have a lot to do with those appointments. We have a lot to do with how they go. And I love what you said about this is honestly can be your show. This could be your agenda. And then once you're done, then I can go. And that is your health. You know, can fire your doctor. And I even like that we're talking about that a little bit more. Not to advocate or encourage firing doctors here, but I can speak for myself. That wasn't my positioning before I had MS. It was not, I don't really like my experience with this doctor. I'm going to go somewhere else. It was like, I don't like my experience with my doctor. I'm just gonna go back because I mean, what did I do? Like, it's almost like it's this not one size fit all, but every doctor's the same. If I go to another one, I'm gonna get the same experience or the same information, and that's totally not it. So I think talking about that a little bit more about really owning your experience with your healthcare professional or provider, and owning the fact that you have a choice. That's super important to talk about.
Right.
And let me also just say, I think that's where it was so important. Excuse me.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Heidi.
The whole patient, the patient programs that the pharmaceutical companies put on, there's kind of pros and cons about those programs. But the nice thing is that, and I'm always an advocate of everybody going to every single one of those sorts of programs to really learn about all the various options, to be able to be a little educated, because I say to patients, if the whole appointment's over and then we're down to the last 5 minutes and you say to your doc, so can you tell me about these new medicines that are on the market? They're going to look at their watch and they're going to say, you're fine. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you present to your doc, you know what, I've been to a couple of different programs and, this particular product it's kind of interesting to me. Like, can we talk about that? You're going to get a lot more play out of that kind of interaction than putting somebody on the spot who maybe has no idea about these medicines and
Right.
doesn't have a lot of insight. And so, you have to be kind of work that appointment.
Strategic.
You just have to
Mm-hmm.
learn how to work the appointment to your
Absolutely.
advantage.
Absolutely. And be strategic. Again,
Yeah.
I've had people, particularly in this era of COVID, who will say, why don't you tell me about this, and that? Tell me about the vaccines. I had one particular patient who came in, wanted to hear. And I mean, I talked for like 30 minutes and they were like, yeah, I wasn't going to do it anyway. I just want you to talk about it. And I'm like, really? So again, try to be purposeful. I mean, certainly, I want to update you on all the science, but again, just make sure that you're strategic so that you can get the things addressed that you need to get addressed, and that we're not, I won't say any time is wasted time, but that we're not using that time to focus on other things. And kind of back to what Victoria was saying about, the medical experience, one of the things that we talk a lot about here recently is bias and discrimination within, the healthcare system. It's a big issue, and I think, again, just like if you went and got a hairdo, like for instance, I took my daughter to get a hairdo and it was a horrible experience and she screamed the whole time, would I take her back and put her through that again? No. If somebody messed up your hair, gave you a jacked up haircut, you're not going to go back. Right. So, again, how much more important is our healthcare? Now, we also recognize that there are some communities where resources are limited. Right. So, there may only be, there's a shortage of neurologists. I'm fortunate to live in Atlanta. Heidi lives in Virginia, where there are many people kind of in that area. So that if someone doesn't resonate well with me, they have other specialists, but there's some areas where they don't have that. But certainly within reason, we have to look at what our options are, and just like we wouldn't keep going if somebody was, tearing up our car or, tearing up our hair or did our nails bad, we certainly shouldn't keep going, if we're having horrible experiences, with a particular healthcare system or doctor. So just to say, so yeah, so listen, that went by fast, guys. We've been talking for 40 minutes. This has been an amazing, amazing discussion. We've got people logging in from all over, from Missouri, from Minnesota, from Texas, from Florida and California. And I hope that this information
Yay,
was really
California.
valuable. Yeah, California. Isn't that where you're from, Heidi, originally?
It is. I'm from Los Angeles. Yeah.
Okay. Victoria just moved to the dirty South from the West Coast too. All right. Well, I'm outnumbered here, but that's okay. I rep Atlanta. Um, but yeah. But anyway, I do see one comment in the chat, that said, someone is looking for new doctors across the board and have difficulty with insurance, and so again, that can be an issue, but it's important to, one solution to that could be people could go to their insurance company, see who's on the panel, of their insurance company, to find other doctors in their area, so sometimes there are workarounds, even for that. But again, this has been amazing information. I hope that everybody got something out of it. I think that, certainly there was so much that we talked about, but I love the piece around, being an advocate for yourself, preparing for those visits, whether it is trying to describe the symptoms that you have, trying to find synonyms or other words to describe them, to even, just thinking about what's been going on with you so that the first time you describe it is not when you're sitting there with the doctor and you're trying to, figure it out, and making use of that time, and advocating and taking care of yourself. Are there any parting comments that you ladies would like to leave with our Brain Chat audience? I'll start with Victoria. She's looking like she's thinking
I was
about what
just
she
trying to
wants to say.
think. I re-emphasize, as a patient or from the patient perspective, owning your health, and the broad sentiment of owning your health, owning it in your heart, in your mind, not letting, there's the saying that everyone says, I have MS, but MS doesn't have me. It doesn't have to have you. You own your health, no matter how it looks for you. Owning it, really playing your part, and acknowledging that as a patient, you have a part too. Your doctors don't go home with you. They don't cuddle up with you. They don't help you take your medicine or administer your medicine when they're not with you, or even if they're with you, but they don't do that. It's a lot of integrity involved in being a patient and owning your health. And I just want to really emphasize that, and what that means to all of us, and even as a healthcare provider, what that means to you guys and how that makes your jobs easier, and the relationships probably much better when your patient is owning their health in that way.
Absolutely. Heidi?
Most definitely. You said it so eloquently. Really learn, whatever one needs to kind of wrap their head around in order to be a really good self-advocate, which really just means making the most out of that time that you have in front of your healthcare team, and really bringing it. It is our job to make things better. You're the customer, and you need to bring to the table what you need from that encounter. And so I think people need to really think about that, and really be a self-advocate.
Yeah, amazing advice. And I think the thing that I would hope people would leave with is to be honest. There's a quote that I put at the bottom of every email that says, "The man who conceals his disease can never be cured," right? And so we all mess up in some ways. We know that everybody doesn't take their medicine every day. You're not going to get in trouble. You might to a certain extent, but you're not going to get in trouble. We can't work on things that we don't know are a problem, and I would rather somebody be straightforward with me and say, "Dr. Mitzi, I'm having issues dealing with this MS. I'm in denial. I'm not taking the medicine," than for us to be dealing with a problem or a symptom later, and then come back and say, "Well, I wasn't really taking it." So help us help you, right? And we can't help you if we don't know what's going on. And trust me, there's no symptom that's embarrassing. I have heard it all, and I know Heidi has heard it all too. You would not imagine the things that people tell me. It's not embarrassing. We want to help improve your quality of life, but we can't help fix or ameliorate if we don't know the problem exists, or if we don't know it's a problem. So, build that trusting relationship, and be honest and be open, so that we can try to address and kind of deal with the issues head on. So with that being said, thank you, ladies, for an amazing brain chat. Thank you to all of those of you who have tuned in. We also thank our sponsors, Janssen, Genentech, and Biogen IDEC, for sponsoring Brain Chat. And we will see you again in 2 weeks. You can view this on YouTube on blackdoctor.org's YouTube channel, or Dr. Mitzi Joy MD's YouTube channel if you missed it. And also in a couple of weeks, it will be posted on our Brain Chat with the Nerdy Neurologist podcast on all podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of those things. So thank you, wonderful ladies, and everybody have a wonderful evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.